or wireless. Right, we're live. Da, da, da. What? It's okay. It's fine. You can all speak. So, we're live on Facebook and in the shop. So this is quite exciting. I'm also recording it to put on YouTube later. So we're doing all sorts of things. We're painting like Monet. Well, I'm painting like Monet, and I've chosen one that you may not be familiar with. And here's my Black Country French. Landscape on Ile Sainte-Martin. That sounds a bit French.
Could be.
I don't know. And he painted it in 1881. So I'm going to do a slightly bigger version. Using abstract acrylics, obviously Monet used oils instead. But I do think Monet would have used acrylics had they been invented then because of their fast drying. A few things about the Impressionist movement and what led to it. There are a few things. First thing, invention of paint tubes. It's hard to believe it, but artists would have had to have, up until the 1840s, 1850s, they would have to have made all the paint themselves. So they weren't portable. So a tube of paint means you can go anywhere and do it. The other thing is trains were invented, so they could actually get on and go to places to paint outside, because largely Impressionism was about painting outside. And the other thing was the invention of the flat brush. Up until then, all brushes were pointed and round, or big ones were flat, because they'd be bound in the traditional way of like this hake. So you can see the flat brush, but it's a split bit of wood, but you couldn't do that for small. So with the invention of the flat, and all that was the ferrule here that holds the bristles in, they found if they squished it, it would give them a flat shaped bristle. It's that easy, but that's the Industrial Revolution for you. So just a flat brush, and nearly all Impressionist artists use flat brushes. But they would use hog bristle brushes instead. I'm using a nylon one for this. So that's interesting. And also portable easels that folded down were invented. So you got your canvas, your portable easels with a drawer, put your tubes of paint in and your flat brushes in, hop on a train, go anywhere and paint. Monet was one of the leading founders of Impressionism, and in fact his painting Impression Sunrise at their first exhibition in 1850 gave them the name Impressionism. It was a derogatory term. They were actually the Anonymous Society of Engravers, Painters and Sculptors was their actual name.
It hasn't quite got the same ring to it, has it?
It hasn't. It hasn't. And then there was a report, because they all hated it, and it was based on two people looking at this painting, and it turned out one of them said wallpaper in its embryonic state is more finished than this painting. So it wasn't nice, and then everybody started taking it on and loving it, and it boomed. And Monet was actually one of the few artists who made a lot of money from the sale of his work in his lifetime. He painted outside where possible. There's a big debate where Monet says you can only paint for half an hour at any one time outside because of the changing light, but that doesn't mean that all of his paintings were done in half an hour. A lot of them were, and you'll see when I start in a second how quickly you can do it. But what he would have to do is go back to the same spot at the same time for a week and do half an hour.
Hopefully the same weather conditions.
Yes,
as well.
exactly. That does make a difference. And the same season. So there's lots of factors you have to involve in that. I mean, his large water lily paintings that are 2 metres by 8 metres, you wouldn't do that in half an hour. But there's paintings in the National Gallery. There's one of a beach scene at Trouville, and it's his wife and Madame Boudin sitting on the beach, and there's actually sand embedded in the paint. So obviously while he was painting, it's only sort of a bit bigger than A3, between A3 and A2. Obviously while he was painting, a bit of sand blew up and landed on the painting, but he left it because it's all part of the fun. So I'm using abstract acrylics by Sennelier. I love them because they come in a pouch. They're only $3.95 for 120ml, which is actually really good value. Really good value. Put a bit of ultramarine out.
Oh, that's the mixing thing.
Yeah, it's my palette. But what's good about them is you can buy attachment nozzles. So if you wanted to do abstract painting, you can pipe with them straight from the packet, which is why they're called abstract. That's all. That's the only reason for the name. What have I got here? A bit of black. For speed, we'll use a bit of black. Ooh. They feel squishy, but actually the consistency is quite thick, which is nice. Bit of white.
What if you don't use it all?
We've got 2 people watching live on Facebook. I will use it all. I will, because I've got a commission I've got to finish later on, so I'll use some of it then. They don't dry very quickly either, which is brilliant. We did a class, Angela gave a master class with us on Saturday last week, and I was still using the same paint Saturday night, and some of it was still usable Sunday morning. Bit of cadmium red. I'm not putting these out in any particular order, but bit of cadmium yellow.
So you can keep them, you know, like a little sandwich box basically, isn't it?
Bit of raw sienna.
Box and put paper and tissue on, and just wet it.
Yeah.
Kitchen roll. Yeah. You put the lid back on it, and it's all right in the fridge for a while.
And burnt sienna. Now, can I do it? If I'm doing it like Monet, I have got half an hour now to do a painting. Right. Ooh.
Shut up then.
What, me shut up?
No, well, as if you said this.
Right, so. That's the trouble when you've got cameras everywhere. Let's pop that there. So. This is just a watercolour paper, a lightweight watercolour paper. It's 200 gram with a knocked surface, and this particular pad, it's 100 sheets for 18 quid, which is good value again. And I'm going to try and do it all with this very old looking 1/2 inch flat brush, I think, nylon, System 3. So I've wet it, but I'm going to use the paint quite neat, but I just want the brush quite soft. And then we'll go in with a bit of white and a bit of ultramarine.
Why are you using watercolour paper?
Because I prefer the natural look of watercolour paper. I'm not a massive fan of canvas looking. I like it to be a canvas or not a canvas, but I like the way the paint works on watercolour paper. It gives more of a random texture. So I'm mixing a bit of white and ultramarine together, and with the flat brush you can cover a much larger area quicker than with a round brush. And it's Monet's style is known as tache, T-A-C-H-E, which is French for stain or mark. So he's mark making with his brush, really.
So is that where moustache comes from then?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Stain on your face.
Mouth stain.
I don't know. Had Jackie been here, she would be able to tell me, because she's my French translator.
It would make sense, though, wouldn't it?
It would, a stain on your face, yeah. But yeah, it's very blocky, and some of his paintings, especially when he's working in reflection, you can see those rectangles of paint. But what's interesting, the difference between a flat brush and a round brush is that you can use a round brush in sort of like one way. You can just add pressure to get thicker lines, and you can use the tip to make thinner lines. But with a flat brush, you can use it in so many different ways. It's brilliant. I love it. It's an easy way to start if you're not sure, or you like a bit of Impressionism. If you notice, I'm foolishly just going in blind. I could roughly just quickly sketch in ultramarine. Why do you think I'm using ultramarine? Any ideas? No? Because ultramarine is part of nearly every colour I'm going to use, so it will absorb in. If I was using graphite or charcoal or something to sketch, it would get picked up with the paint and it would start to go mucky, and I'd lose any sort of, you see I've put that a bit too far over, but it's going to be my version of this painting. I'm not doing an exact copy. Bit of a
Do you
tree
normally
there.
use a pencil to do that?
No, I would paint with
You
it.
just paint?
I do it with paint. Or I do it by eye. I might move some of this stuff over, but it just gives me an idea, roughly, where to stick it. Yes, I'm sure you would tell me where to stick it. Oh, we've got 4 joined live now. Welcome. Right, so as I say, Monet would have used oils, hog hair flat brushes. Obviously they didn't have nylon. However, Degas, who was also an Impressionist, and Renoir, they all had their own preferred colours, but Renoir used silk bristle, which would have been the forerunner to nylon, as well as hog hair. Other artists would have used sable. Yeah, it's interesting really, looking through and seeing. So you want to keep it quite blocky. The that's my term, not an Impressionist term, blocky. You don't want it all smoothed out. You want to see the brush marks in. But I'll show you what I mean about how versatile the paint is. Only slightly. It's taken me about 3 weeks to try and get the colours more natural on there than there. The projector doesn't show the colours accurately, but on my camera they're a lot paler now than on there, but on Facebook it should be the right sort of colour. Now you see I'm moving that tree over. I'm not happy about sticking it there, but it's alright. That's what you can do with acrylics, like you were saying, V. Yeah. What's the advantage of them? You couldn't do this in watercolour. But I've covered that, 5 minutes. Got my sky blocked in with this tache style. But what I'm doing as well, if you notice, I'm flipping my brush over to get more coverage. So I'm running out of paint that way, but then I can flip it over and I've got the other half of the brush loaded with paint. With oils it would be more slick. But the other advantage...
How quick does the acrylic...
That's dry. On canvas, this isn't prime, this is just watercolour paper, but on canvas, because it's sealed, you do get extra working time. But I like the fact that it dries quickly. Yeah. I like the fact it dries quickly because it means I can do demos like this in 45 minutes without having to worry too much about it. We'll go a bit darker up the top. Oh, I just nudged the camera. No, we're all right. Yes, it's a free demo, Janine. Oh, right, apparently moustache comes from the ancient Greek.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
See, it's brilliant doing these live things. We find all sorts of things out. It is. It's better than Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because I ain't got any friends. I wouldn't get very far. Right, so we'll keep that blocky style. But for doing the clouds, we'll go with a very, very pale blue, so white and ultramarine. But because it's flat, what I've done is I've pulled the paint out, flipped the brush over and pulled it out. So I've got a wedge, I've got a chisel, so I can use it on its edge. And that will give me a different brush stroke. I'll wipe a bit of that off. So I'm rocking with the brush a little bit.
And that's on top of...
That's on top of the dry, but it is dry. When Monet would have done it, it wouldn't have been dry. The Impressionist technique is known as alla prima, all in one go. So, which was very different to the traditional style of painting of the day, which was known as the staged or studio method, where you'd paint it all in black and white first, let it dry, then put coloured glazes on, let it dry, then put thicker layers on over the top. So it would take months. Whereas with an Impressionist painting, it was just all done and dusted in one go. Ooh, I've just had a congratulations on my most commented live video yet, so that's quite interesting. Bring a little bit of that out, a little bit of wispiness. Go back in with some dark, which I can do to block in some areas where I've overlaid.
Yeah,
Monet.
Sometimes clouds sort of, they're a mixture of colours, aren't they?
They are, yeah. They're not just white, and because they're sort of transparent, you'll see the blue through them, and you might get the grey bits or, you know, whatever's going on with the light around them as well. So there's...
It could look blocky, couldn't it?
Yeah, you could do it quite blocky. Like a mackerel sky is very blocky. I love that word. When I do another art book, the one that I've got is available on Amazon at £5.50. Just simple start.
What's it called?
It's called Simple Start.
It's called Simple Start.
Yeah,
okay.
Simple Start, and it's 100 pages, and there's worksheets to go through, and on how to use acrylics, watercolours, drawing techniques.
Is it a Kindle?
It's on Kindle, but if you haven't got a Kindle, but you've got the free Kindle app on your iPad, you can see it in full colour for free.
I've got that.
So that's good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, but what is your second name?
White House.
White House. Thank
Yes.
you.
Barry
That's not
Whitehouse.
Barry. I don't think that would work, would it?
I get called all sorts, but just Google Barry Whitehouse, or if you put my name in, there won't be very many books. You might find something by Barry White. Might be a better read. I don't know. Right. I'm not going to do too much more. I do want to lighten that sky up a little bit down here. But if you notice, I'm not really cleaning my brush. I've only used my water to soften the brush. I'm using a variety of tones within the yellow and the within the white and the blue. And my finger. It's quite interesting, I think, with this. But Monet would wear a dark smock, so the light wouldn't reflect off him onto the painting, so he would get a more true representation of the colour. So, you know, I think with the Impressionists, a lot of people think that they're a bit gimmicky and, you know, rebels. They were all taught properly how to paint, but, you know, during the Impressionist movement, you've got photography that's coming out in the 1850s now, which was when the first Impressionist exhibition is. So paintings needed to change, and the Impressionist movement did that. And in fact, when you look at art history, everything was the same until the Impressionist period, which was the pivotal movement which led to abstract Impressionism, Cubism. All the stuff that we know as modern art is basically down to derivations of Impressionism, which I think is brilliant. Right, I'm not going to do any more with that. I will clean my brush. Well, we're back down to one now. They must have got bored.
I've got a cup of tea, probably.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you're still here, so that's good. Right, we'll go with a bit of Naples yellow. No, bit of raw sienna, bit of white, tiny bit of cad red, and we'll just mark down this hill. It's quite free, so if you're feeling that you're quite trapped and, you know, you want to do more loose style painting, Impressionism is probably a really good way to go, because you're only using one sort of flat brush, and it makes life quite interesting. You can't bog yourself down with fiddly stuff when you're using a flat brush. So it's something to try, you know.
More forgiving than watercolour, isn't it?
Totally. Absolutely more forgiving. You see that tree's in the wrong place, is it? A little bit, or is that another? Don't matter. So I'll go in with a little bit of ultramarine and cad yellow and white, and that can start to mark in where we are with hill shapes. So that's going in the direction. So your brush strokes kind of follow the direction of the object that you're going in. So because we've got hills and things here, we're going in that direction. And I don't want to go too dark because I'm going to lose it for the trees if I go really dark. So we'll keep it light, but I will go dark for those trees here, so I'll go in. The reason why I've done this with this blue is because things in the distance are more blue the further away they are. And so it's kind of like a funny blue really. It's not green and it's not blue, but it should help give a bit of distance and depth. And I'm really chiseling out the shape. This is very, very free and loose. Right, we've got this tree here which is a bit darker. Stick a bit of black in that. Too much black. Go with black to start with. Right, so
What you got there? Black and what?
there's black, blue and cad yellow in this. Just to make it a bit dark, I might use neat black just on its own because the light's coming from the right. And then I'll stipple a bit of yellow on the top of that. See, black's quite a strong colour, so you want to be a little bit sparing with it to start with, and then you can build it up as you go on. Yeah. Yeah, it's really quite a useful colour because if you I don't normally teach with black, but for these sort of things they did use black. But if you mix black with yellow, you get green because black isn't a real colour.
No, we did that.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of blue in it, so when you mix it with the yellow you get a sort of olivey green. So I'm just dabbing using this tash. I only do acrylics once a fortnight though, Janine, on the daytime, so unfortunately you may not be able to make it, but they're a lot more vibrant and more forgiving than watercolours, that's for sure. Ooh, I'm not going to do it in the time, am I? That's why Monet was good at what he does. I think a lot of people think, oh, Impressionism's really easy to do until you try it. And it's not easy to do.
The more you look, the more you see, don't you?
Exactly, and what the classical part about it is the colours are always got to be natural. They're having fun down there, aren't they?
Sure, it's only coffee they got.
I think it's rude art connected, to be honest, from what I've picked up with my teacher's ears. And I do know who he is that they're talking about. But I can't comment live on Facebook what he does. But he uses parts of his anatomy to paint paintings with.
Can't imagine what he uses.
No. But it's different. Very different indeed. And no, I will not be doing live demonstrations on how to paint like him. Huge sigh of relief over the whole of Facebook.
I hope he doesn't do oils.
No, well, quite. Good job we didn't do lino cutting. So I'm blocking in with the dark. I've got to do that church thing. I'm going to stick with all doing this brush, I think. So I'm going to mix a bit of blue and white and grey.
I'm not familiar with this picture, but is it sort of coming downhill?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he painted a few versions of this.
Yeah.
I chose this one because I thought not many people would be familiar with it, to be honest. I have got somewhere in that big area of stuff on the table. I've got a Monet we did. Did you come to that one, Marie? Where we did Monet's wife.
No. Oh no, I didn't do that. No, I can't remember that one.
Oh, I'll see if I can find it in a sec. I will use a finer brush in a minute to depict that a bit more, but then what I'm going to do is go in with a bit more yellow and a bit more blue and turn the lights on with it. So less over here, more over this side. So what's nice about this is if you're doing this in watercolours, you see, you'd have to put your lightest green down first, gradually get darker and darker and darker. But with this sort of method, you can put any colour down first. Put your darks first, you don't get your cauliflowers now, and you can just...
You tend to put dark first, though, don't you?
I prefer to put darks down first. It's not the law, but I think it works really well because you start to get that depth.
Yeah.
So I can use neat yellow and perhaps a little bit of white just to put the really vibrant bits on. So I'm doing this quicker than I would because of the time. So don't forget, it's Impressionism, so it's that idea of what it is. So the colours have to be right, the shapes have to be right, but I kind of think of Impressionism like looking through frosted glass. It's there, but not there.
Me when I don't put my glasses on.
Yeah,
Like that.
yeah. There are actually some artists who paint with glasses. They don't need glasses, but one glass is clear and the other is frosted, so they can see what it looks like by changing eyes.
Didn't Monet have problems with his eyesight later on in
He
life?
did. He had cataracts, and he had his cataracts removed, and that's what started him. What's all right? He gave up painting because of it, actually.
Who was it went on to do pastels? 'Cause they
Degas. That's Degas lost his eyesight. He had damage to his eyesight during the Franco-Prussian War, whereas Monet escaped the country. He couldn't fight during that war, and he's just got old, and his eyesight deteriorated. And you can actually see some of his paintings. The colours are totally wrong. And when he saw it, he kind of, after his operation, he said, "Well, I thought I could paint," and he retired. I think he was in his 80s, and he just gave up. There's one of the paintings of the Japanese bridge, which is quite. I've added a bit more ultramarine to this. Quite a famous one, the Japanese bridge. It's on mouse mats and everything, and his later one is in bright reds and oranges, which he got the colours confused for greens and blues.
I went to see the Monet exhibition in London, quite a few years ago now, and there was a few of that bridge, but very, very different colours.
Yeah, he destroyed quite a few bits of them. I mean, some people like his later work because it's quite abstract, but it's not. What I find really sad, and when I give art history talks and we talk about Monet, is, you know, when you see the founder of Impressionism, and imagine that he thought he was painting with colours like this, and then suddenly to be told and to see for yourself, actually, the colours are all wrong.
It might have been better if you'd have never known, mightn't it?
I think so. I think so. But his one eye was worse than the other. But yeah, it's interesting with the Impressionist movement. I'll try and give you as much information about it as possible. I've done several talks about it because during the time of the Impressionist movement, before and after and during, you'd got the Franco-Prussian War going on, and Paris was sieged, so they couldn't come in, couldn't go out. A lot of the artists had to enlist and fight, and suffered in various ways, and those that couldn't fight had to flee. Pissarro, who was Dutch by nature, he came over to England the same time as Monet and Sisley, and when he returned, over 1,000 of his paintings had been used as doormats by the guards and soldiers, so he lost a lot of work, his whole life's work really. So it was a difficult time, yet the paintings don't reflect what was going on at the time. I've added a bit more ultramarine and a bit of white to this. So it's quite a tumultuous time period, as well as having this. So maybe Impressionism is a bit of escapism for the artists. But yeah, Degas, Renoir all had to fight. Monet left, Sisley left, Pissarro left. Just a bit more white there, and we'll go with, still not cleaning my brush. It's quite fun to do it because you've got lots of different shades of green already on there. It's not really looking much like that at all, is it? But we'll go. This is probably a lot bigger Monet's ears than mine, so we could do a bit more fiddling. I'm making excuses, aren't I? But I'm not Monet.
Would you have done something much bigger than that?
Well, probably about twice the size, 3 times the size. Well, just over half an hour. There's lots of stories about Monet that I'm sure are definitely not true. There's one where it's said that he was out painting an autumn or a winter tree, and he had to keep coming back to paint it because of the time, and the light is different in winter and it'd get much shorter spaces. And the story goes that he actually he took such a long time on it that leaves started growing on the trees, and he requested that the local council remove all the leaves for him so he could carry on painting. I'm really not sure that was true, but it's quite fun nonetheless to hear about it. I might swap with a finer brush. Right, so let's go on to this side now, just so we can get stuff blocked in. I have cleaned my brush. Bit of raw sienna, bit of cad yellow. Block it in. You don't have to make the do-do-do sound. It's just quite fun to do your sound effects. And yes, I forgot I was live on Facebook as well, so that's preserved forevermore. But my brush is still a little bit dirty, but can you see it's got like a green tinge towards the base of the bristles, which actually
looks quite good,
works all right. Oh, thank you, Marie.
It's all right.
You can come again. So the light's coming from there. Got to keep checking. Stop there, and we can naturally go into some green. I think out of all of the artists to copy, Monet is one of the easiest ones. Sisley even easier because his is like a more loose version of Monet. Van Gogh, very difficult. Seurat, almost impossible because of all the dots. He's post-Impressionism, so he came right towards the end of the Impressionist movement. Pissarro is actually what Monet exhibited in a lot of Impressionist exhibitions, but never changed his style. He kept his Impressionist style solid throughout, whereas Pissarro, he was embracing change all the time. So he went from traditional Impressionist techniques to more pointillist techniques.
Who was the one on Antiques Roadshow the other week? What was
He had an engraver. Macadamar. Yeah. That one that it was worth so much money, wasn't it? Yeah.
Maybe mine will be one day.
We won't reap it until you're dead, sorry.
I won't,
That's what
no.
they do, isn't it?
Well, you wonder who's the most clever, the artist or the engraver, who had to copy what you've done.
That's true. That is true. Well, that's where Monet was really good. He did make money on his art. And interestingly, the guy that made him the money was the art dealer Theo Van Gogh, Van Gogh's brother. He arranged for Monet to have all of these exhibitions. He had exhibitions in America, so for the time that we're talking, that's pretty vast to be able to sell your work in a style that nobody liked previously, to then be able to get exhibitions and sell for thousands of francs
And do it
your paintings.
internationally
Do
as
it
well.
internationally.
Yeah.
He was asked by the French president to do, you know, to donate paintings to the country. So he was really, really well known. He did come over to London, as I said, but that was mainly during the Franco-Prussian War to escape the fighting.
Couldn't Theo do it for his own brother then? Was that?
No, well that's, you know, Theo was good, but with all the challenges that Vincent had in his life, it was very difficult, I think. And it was Impressionism was a hard taskmaster to sell the work anyway, because it was hated so much initially. But Vincent's style was even far, you know, it was more impressionistic than the Impressionists. His is post-impressionism / fauvism, Van Gogh's. So his is towards the end, fauvism. And I can't remember what it means. We did have a big discussion about this, because I foolishly thought it was French for false because the colours were too vibrant, but it does mean something that's something to do with F-A-U-V-I-S-M. So it's the same sort of thing as faux, but it means something to do with a galloping animal, I think.
Wild beasts.
Yeah, wild beasts, yes. Yeah, wild beasts. So it's not, I prefer my version of it because it sounds better. And it's more like it, but yeah, wild beasts is the true meaning of fauvism. But I don't know whether it feels like you've got loads of animals jumping over it. I don't know. So we'll go with a bit of cadmium red, a bit of raw sienna, a bit of white. But it's amazing, although I'm painting like this, I'm not using gallons of paint up, if you notice. White is probably the one that I've used the most. Put a little path in. And we've got some of this sort of colour. If I use the brush that way. See, it's starting to build up now anyway. It's starting to look a bit like a painting.
What's it a field of?
I really don't know. It looks like poppies and...
Oh, right, yeah.
But the poppies are quite muted. There's a few versions of this painting, but this is the one that's a bit more in your face. I might swap with a smaller brush as well, because it wasn't just the flat brush that they used. Let's swap with a round. Just so you can see the difference in brush marks.
So you don't take off the excess water either?
No, I just move it in with the paint to let the paint sort of move about. But by not cleaning the brush, you see, and by using all of the colours on the palette, you get such a variety of tones that make every painting unique, because you can't get the same mixes all the time. So I'd have to spend a lot longer looking.
Putting in that bit of red makes a lot of difference.
Brings it closer as well, doesn't it? So we've got slightly stronger down here. How much? Oh gosh, come on, Barry Monet, pull your finger out, lad. But it's warm and it's cosy up here, isn't it? So
It's very pleasant up here, actually.
you should come to our classes.
Never been before. It's really
Yeah,
nice.
this is how we teach the classes up here. I use this. I don't use that. My classes aren't on
Coming
Facebook.
is it next Sunday?
Yeah,
Yes.
Woodland in watercolours.
Yes, I'm
Yeah,
coming to that one.
wonderful. Yeah, so that will be using this on the big screen.
Today.
You do, yeah. And it's 10:30 till 1. So we'll lighten it a little bit with a bit of colour. Bit of cad yellow, but plop with my fingers a little bit. We've got some darks there, so let's go with a bit of ultramarine. So he would have used thinners or terps, whereas I'm using water. If you wanted to go more impressionistic, like Monet would have done, you could use water. Yes. Nothing wrong with stupid.
Well,
There's no stupid.
He would have used thinners or terps.
Yeah.
You're using water.
Yeah.
If you use terps, it's like, is that like lifting out or something?
No, because he was using oils, so he would have to dilute the oil.
No, it's not.
It's not a silly question at all. There's no such thing as a silly question in art, to be honest.
I was forgetting about the
Bit of shadow going across here. It's really quite dark in there, isn't it? Can you see how the shapes are different now I've swapped to a round brush?
Yeah.
You get more of a pointed bit, whereas with the flat brush you get something different. I've got a video.
Together now, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you said that. But I've got a video on YouTube that I did several years ago on paint like Monet, and that's had a couple of 100,000 hits across the world, and that was water lilies I was doing with that one. It gets a bit of abuse from time to time, which is always quite fun. But you know,
You can't please everyone.
it makes you feel quite special when you get trolls. Makes you feel like you've really made it if you've got your own internet troll abusing you. But I take it on the chin. Some of them, they you know, some of the things they say is right. I did make the stupid mistake of mistranslating Tash in my video and thought it was touch because it's touch.
Oh, okay.
But so there's a lot of corrections on that video, but I am aware that Tash means
I think that's what
Stain.
some people do, isn't it? They spend their whole time trolling through YouTube or something just so they can
yeah.
criticise and
But you know,
pick people up on.
I've said in these videos that they are just. It's not a Monet biography like this isn't. It's a few facts about Monet and a bit about his style. It's not the be-all and end-all, and he didn't do everything exactly like this all the time.
Doing it for a dissertation or something, are you?
No, exactly. It's just to help people. And with the YouTube videos, there's a lot of school teachers that don't actually paint that can download the YouTube videos and play it on their classroom on the smartboard like we've got for the kids to use. So it reaches a lot of people and it brings pleasure, and that's kind of what it's about. So I can use the really tickly bit of the round brush just to bring out a few more highlights here and there. That's really quite pale if you look. Oh well, you can't. If you look at that, if you look how almost turquoise
Yeah.
that is, but very very pale. So yeah, do make sure when you do these that you do put your own name on. Don't try and write Monet, whatever you do, because it's kind of illegal. If you want to fool the experts, just leave it unsigned. Because then you can say, I'm not sure if it is. It may be. But then they'll say, well, isn't that acrylics? And you go, yeah.
I'm going to put Mum, 2016.
But it's the darks that will start bringing it forward now. So I'm just using neat black. And
I keep getting drawn to the mountains.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
That's because you're a mountain girl, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's all very
It draws you
sort of
in.
impression.
Let's bring that in a little bit more. There's loads of work I could do. I'll do a bit more, but I don't want to keep you too long.
I was going to say, how much more work would you think there was on that then to do?
I'd probably do this in, if I was going to go out and do it like Monet would, it would probably be 2 sittings, I think. Or I'd really try hard to get as much done as I could in the time that I could get it done in. But obviously I'm doing lots of stuff while I'm here as well. I've got 6 of you here and I've got probably nobody on Facebook. How many on Facebook? 1, I've still got 1.
Got your one.
Thank you for the die-hard person on Facebook still watching.
So if you were finishing this one now, how much more would you do on that?
I'd probably do about another half an hour on it actually. It's just looking, I'm all about the relationships between lights and darks, so I want to see where the light bits are against the darks and what I can add. I haven't used any burnt sienna at all and I squeezed that out. Let's use some. So I'm cutting into the darker, into the lighter part, so it stands out a bit more, because if the light's coming from there, then we'll darken the path a little bit here, and there's a few more darker bits in here. The thing to remember is, if you're not an impressionist painter, that you don't want to keep fiddling, because fiddling makes it less impressionistic. So you have to sort of draw the line and go,
that's what I was thinking, you know, knowing
actually,
when to stop.
don't stop. When I find, somebody else asked me that, I think, in a class I was teaching, how do you know when to stop? And usually it's when you ask yourself that question. If you think, should I just do a little bit more? I wouldn't, actually. I'd stop, put it away for a bit,
Come back to it.
come back to it in a couple of hours, and see if you need to do a bit more to it. Sometimes you will. I know there are some artists that will put it in a cupboard after that point, and they'll get it out 2 weeks later or a couple of days later, and just go, actually that's fine as it is, I'm happy, or I need to put a little bit more of this or that in. There's a bit more here. You kind of want to go a bit warmer towards the lower part if you can, so more yellows and reds and things. I might redden these up a little bit, but obviously it is very impressionistic. You almost have to squint at it to get the full idea of what it's about, or take your glasses off, or whatever works for you. And it's remembering where the light is coming from. But if you were out in the field, you see, you'd know where the light was coming from. However, if you were there too long, it wouldn't be there. The shadows would all be very different, which makes a big difference to your work if you've got the shadows moving along. You see, I think that should be a little bit muckier in here.
Sorry, I've got a lift.
Yeah, that's fine. I will, let me just sort of mark on that church in the distance. I will leave it as it is, I think. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Do you want to buy it? Let me darken. Got to try, haven't you? Times are hard.
Yeah.
Too right.
You need a Theo Van Gogh, don't you, to come along?
Yeah, I do. Just so we can say, yeah, we'll sell these works for thousands. And I'll laugh. So I've just strengthened the red in some of these a little bit. Just to bring it closer to us. What colour am I after? Not after that colour, I'm after this colour.
So you're very good at being quite random.
Yeah, a lot of people say that about me. Yeah, I just look, I'm looking all the time to see where the different shades are, and then I'll put them in at the same time while I've got it on my brush, to save going back and doing one bit and then coming and doing it. Oh, I've blobbed all over that church now. Idiot.
It's acrylic, don't worry.
Well, yeah, this is it. But I do think this is why I think Monet would have liked acrylics, because you can do such a lot with it, and you can paint over it and do all sorts.
When
I think.
did acrylics start off then?
Well, originally, believe it or not, in the 40s, but it was oil-based back then, and it wasn't until the 60s that it started to become more popular, so people like Hockney and Warhol would have used it. But the original acrylics aren't as light, fast, and as good as the ones today, obviously. But there's some of the older acrylic paintings have actually got really dirty. They found out that they can't clean them,
Oh, really?
because as they've got older, they've opened up tiny little pores in the surface that have attracted the dirt, because most people didn't varnish acrylics, not in the same way as well. So modern acrylics, very different to that. Very different indeed. They're light fast. The purists still aren't massive fans of it because you don't know. We know oils will last for 400, 500, 600 years. We know that watercolours will last that long. We don't know how long acrylics will last. For me, as long as it lasts, as long as the cheque clears, that's fine. That's a joke, Facebook. That's a joke. But for others, preserving your name for centuries is a big thing. But even marker pens now, Winsor & Newton have bought a range of marker pens out that are light fast for over 100 years. So if they can do that to a pen, they can do it to paint.
Never thought about that being like actually light fast.
Because that's what will diffuse or change with time. It's the light that affects the colour, which is why a lot of the old paintings, reds and greens are a problem because they tend to go straight away, whereas the earth tones stand out more. Let's put a bit of light on the field, shall we? Let's turn the light on a little bit, and then I'll shut up. I've kept you longer than Monet would have done.
Yeah.
But at least you're not out in the rain.
Is it still raining?
As it's starting.
No, it looks so nice over there. I expected to turn around and it be sunny.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's not that colour sky though, is it?
No, it's very grim.
Right, I'm going to stop there, I think.
What's a bit of
So while that's on,
sunshine
I'll see if I can
there?
dig out another Monet I did. I think it's in this folder here.
All you can see is loads of colour in that.
Yeah.
This is the one I did of Monet's wife. Camille.
Oh, that one, yes,
You did do that
I'm
one.
the lion person. Oh, yes.
So this is a Monet I did
You did.
a while back.
Oh, yes, we did.
Well, thank you for Janine. It is Janine from next door that's who's watching.
Oh, is it?
She's our die-hard. Thank you so much.
That's very good, Barry.
So yeah, so there we go. That's Paint Like Monet. Very, very quickly.
Eyes are gone. Look at
Yeah.
that, don't they?
So thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.